How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and today we're going to be talking about supercars, which are some of the most sought-after, desirable cars on the planet. I am a huge fan of this type of car, but my personal preferences aside, there's something that we can all agree on, and it's the fact that supercars are expensive. Or are they? Today, I'm going to show you the top 10 supercars that you found on AutoTempest for the price of a Toyota Camry. And if you think that's a little bit too good to be true, then you should probably stick around because there's a few good reasons why these cars are so cheap. So if you guys are new to my channel, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoy it, and consider subscribing and hit that bell if you like what you see. Now this is a brand new series called Found on AutoTempest, where I take your listings that you find on AutoTempest and I put them in a top 10 list. So the way it works is these 10 cars are going to be sorted by popularity from least popular to most popular, and then I'm going to break each of those down into 3 separate categories. Number 1, the good, number 2, the bad, and number 3, would I buy it? And I'm going to try to be normal and not my usual hoarder self. Or if you're my wife, a person who collects fine automobiles that never lose any money at all. Today's theme, if you didn't know by the title, is cheap supercars. But you can stick around till the end of the episode to find out how your submissions can make it in the next video of the series. So if you guys don't know what AutoTempest is, it's an amazing website that I go to every single day, and it takes all the major car listing sites and puts them into one very, very easy search. In fact, that's their slogan, all the cars, one search. Go check it out in the link in the video description below. And you can check out all of the cars that we talk about here in the AutoTempest page, also in the description below. And you can also get these shirts. Now, this shirt is really cool because it's a shirt showing my Aston Martin V12 Vantage S from CarTrek. And you can find this in the AutoTempest merch store, and all the proceeds from this month will go to cancer research. So you'll get a cool shirt, it'll go to a good cause. Now before we get into what 10 supercars you guys picked, we should probably define what a supercar is, because everybody on the internet has an opinion of what a supercar is, and more importantly, what a supercar isn't. So let's make sure we're all on the same page. I think a supercar should be 3 things. And I know I'm using a different 3. This is like a German 3. This is an American 3. I learned that from a Quentin Tarantino movie. Number 1, it has to be exclusive. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't be a base model, but that base model has to be special. It can't be something that you'd see regularly in a Walmart parking lot. Now, number 2 is that it has to be expensive. Now, expensive is a subjective term, but let's just say the car has to be more than $100,000 when it was new. And number 3, it has to be fast. Now, fast is also a subjective term, but I'm gonna be like the government and say, I'll know it when I see it. All right, now that we're all on the same page, let's get into your picks. Number 10, at a little less than $38,000, is a 2012 Jaguar XKR-S.
Nice.
So first off, the good with this car is a lot of good. This Jaguar was designed by Ian Callum, who was basically the father of modern Aston Martins. So this car has a supercharged V8 engine making north of 500 horsepower, which is akin to the highest horsepower V12 Aston Martins of the day. So the bad concerning this platform is not super horrible, but it can be a deal breaker if you're the kind of person that would buy this just for, let's just say, attention. You definitely don't want to be stopped at a stoplight and have an Aston Martin pull up next to you, because then you're going to have to just drive this thing into traffic. Now, that was obviously a joke, but if image is something that matters to you, then you'd probably be better with buying an Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Another thing is that it's only an automatic transmission. I like a manual, and Aston Martins did come with a manual, and I keep on comparing the two because they look so similar and their power figures are so similar, and people realistically are going to be price shopping between those two. So if you like this sort of cruiser thing going on and don't want a more sporty experience, then I think you probably should go with the Jaguar. But for this amount of money, for 38 grand for a well-sorted example of an XKR-S, then I think I would buy it. Next one on the list, number 9, at a little less than $32,000, is a 2012 Fisker Karma. Not sure you guys understand what the point of this is. Now, the Fisker Karma, fun fact, was the original design for the Tesla Model S. Elon Musk and Henrik Fisker had a little bit of a parting of ways, and Tesla decided to do its own thing, and Fisker decided to do its own thing, and now the jury's out on who got a better deal. Fisker actually went under because they had a ton of problems with their production. They had a ton of cars catch fire because of Hurricane Sandy, and generally their cars weren't regarded as the best in quality, but they were really cool cars, and they were electric, but they had a power plant that was driven by gasoline. So they had an Ecotec GM turbocharged engine that was, in fact, a generator for the electric power plant, which was a really, really good idea. You didn't have to worry about a supercharger network because in 2012, that wasn't a super huge thing. Well, at least back then. These cars were $100,000 back when they were new. And here's a little secret. These cars are still $100,000, only under a different name. Now, Fisker eventually just dissolved, the company went under, but then somebody bought them and called them the Karma Revero. Karma being the make and the Revero being the model, but essentially they are the same car as all those years ago. So right now you can get a car that is used, but that looks like a brand new car that you can get today for more than $100,000, except that you have $70,000 back in your pocket. That is a really, really good thing about this car. Now, the bad is quite a bit because the build quality was not the best. Also, they are very complex. I'm not sure if you can get a mechanic that would want to work on these things. The battery packs, you have the interior, you have all the wiring, you have all the electronics. That stuff is probably a little bit hard to get and a little bit hard to repair. Having said that, would I buy this car? I think for 30 grand, for around 30 grand, you could do a lot worse, and I don't think at this price they're going to be depreciating a lot more. So as far as me buying it, I think I would. All right, number 8 at a little more than $31,000 is a 2003 Dodge Viper SRT10. This is doing it right. This is a supercar on a budget. Right off the bat, there's a lot of good in this car. It has an 8.3 liter V10 making 500 horsepower, and if you think that's sort of a small amount of horsepower for that big of an engine, it is, but you can mod these things to like 1,000 horsepower plus and have a real death trap on your hands. These were basically like go-karts with a huge engine in the front. It is completely crazy. It makes a really interesting noise. I'm not going to say it sounds exotic, but a V10 sounds like a V10, and it has one of the best names in the industry. I mean, Viper that is doing it right. That is doing names right. Mercedes, BMW, take notice. Everything I stated in the good section could also be stated in the bad section. If you don't like the styling, then this car is not for you. The way that you drive in this car is unlike any other car. Now, this Lamborghini behind me, it has an interesting way of sitting. You don't really sit straight forward. You have the steering wheel in front of you, but it's sort of off to the side like this towards the middle of the car. The Viper is the complete opposite. So you have the steering wheel in front of you, but your body kind of goes this way out of the car because of that huge engine that essentially sits next to you. So this is not a car that you would take on a long road trip. It's not very practical. It's also one of these things where you can actually get hurt, and it's very common, and that is the burns on your leg. Because of those side pipes, the catalytic converters are right there, and they get very hot. They tend to boil the paint in that part of the car, and when you get out of the car, and if you're not paying attention, you could actually burn your calf, and Viper owners call these snake bites. So that's sort of cute, but I don't want any welts on my calf from a car that I just paid 30 grand for. So maybe that's not the car for you if that's a concern. Now, when it comes to the question of whether I would buy it, yes, I would. I would love an 03 Viper. It's an early 3rd gen model year, which means that you could put a lot of mods on it. You could put a supercharger, you could do a twin turbo kit. You could just make it really cool. I mean, 500 horsepower is a lot, and you can make it into a cool little weekend canyon carver. Not a canyon carver, you'll probably end up at the bottom of a canyon, but you could probably make it a cool little cruiser. So this, for that amount of money, for a little more than $31,000, is a really, really good deal. And number 7 at a little less than 30 grand is a 1975 Ferrari 308 GT4. And this one is a little weird because when we talk about supercars, we did mention that they have to be fast. So if you compare this to a modern Camry, like the V6 top of the range one, the Camry will blow the doors off this Ferrari every day of the week and twice on Sundays. This car was slow. And this one in particular needs a little bit of work, but considering it's a 1970s Ferrari with a gated manual transmission, and it has looks that are coming back into vogue, I think it's not such a bad buy. Now, the good of the car is obviously the brand. You're buying a Ferrari, and you're buying one back when Enzo Ferrari was still alive. It is very rev happy. It has a 3-liter, 8-cylinder engine, and it makes a very, very good noise. Now, the bad of this car is quite a bit because I can't imagine that parts for this car are easy to come by. I also can't imagine that if you're any taller than like 5'7", you probably will have a problem getting into this car and fitting in it comfortably. These cars were notoriously small, and you didn't have a ton of room to move the seat up. You didn't have a ton of room to move the steering wheel. It was at a really weird angle. So driving this car is not very practical, and it also doesn't make a lot of power. But having said all of that, would I buy it? I don't really know. I'm not a big fan of these cars, and I would say that if you can save up a little bit more, I would get a Project 348 or 355. They're way better cars. And if you can save up even more, I would get like a beat up 360, and those are getting into like actually fast, actually drivable, actually practical Ferraris. So unfortunately, I don't think I would buy this one. Next up at number 6, at just under $29,000 is a 2006 Cadillac XLR-V. This one is a little bit weird. Now let's go over the good. This car was in direct competition with the BMW 6 Series and the Mercedes-Benz SL class, even though Cadillac will tell you that was not the case. Now the XLR-V was the big, brutish, supercharged version with some performance in mind, but here's something that I don't get. When they made this car, they had the LS engine, and they already had a supercharged version at the time, so why didn't they use that? Instead, they used a 4.4-liter Northstar engine, and they added a supercharger which made around 443 horsepower, which, for the competition, was not good. The SL had 500 horsepower, the BMW M6 had 500 horsepower, GM just dropped the ball on this, and I think it's because they wanted to use that Northstar engine before it just went away altogether. But I don't want to bash this car too hard because it really looks good. I think it has that concept car feel. Now, the fact that it's a hardtop convertible really adds to the appeal. I love the way this car looks, and you don't really see them that often, so they are quite rare. I'm not sure if that's because all of them are in the junkyard or something. This car would be at home in any Cars and Coffee where people would come and ask you about it, and you can tell them about the wonders of the Northstar engine and why they're better than the LS in every way, and blah, 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 blah. Now, the bad with this car is the fact that they didn't really make too many of them. The Northstar engine was pretty temperamental when it came to head gasket failures. Now, this was on the tail end of the Northstar production line, and they did have that sort of down pat, but I know when you add boost, that increases cylinder pressure, and that can introduce some heat issues, and head gaskets don't really like that. Another thing that's really not too great is the performance aspect of the car. This was a V version, but this is not a performer. This is more of a grand tour, a luxury car. Just pretend it's a supercharged luxury car and not something that would compete with a SL55 or an M6, which is sort of top echelon of performance coupes at the time. Now, to answer the question of would I buy it, I think this is just rare enough and just cool enough that yes, I would buy it, and I would probably go and find one that's a little bit more haggard and needs a little bit more work, because I think you can get one for really, really cheap. Or you can get a regular version of this car and put an LS in there as it should have been from the factory, and you'll have a pretty good sleeper that looks good, it sounds good, and it might actually perform well too. Now, number 5, at less than $26,000, is a 2006 Aston Martin DB9. Oh yes! Yes, everybody, this is how you do it. So right off the bat, there is a lot of good in this car. Now, this was designed by Henrik Fisker and in part by Ian Callum, and this employed something called the golden ratio. Now, Aston Martin had this idea when they were designing their cars. It's like a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio, and they used it all over their cars, but it's a natural way for your eye to recognize natural beauty. That's why this car has no bad angles. It is a beautiful car. I would say one of the most beautiful cars ever made. Another really good thing about this car is the fact that it had a 6-liter naturally aspirated V12. That was sort of kind of derived from the Duratec V6, but it was its own engine. It had an amazing intake and exhaust note. You can actually make these things sound like F1 cars with the right exhaust. And they were incredibly smooth. When they were paired with an automatic transmission, they were quite possibly the best grand touring cars that you could buy. There are a few bad things about this car in particular. Now, the 2006 models, which were the early years of the DB9, they had problems with oil starvation in the engine, which could grenade that V12 in a matter of seconds. They had some issues with the interior. The leather started being like this, just all wrinkly, and they didn't like being set out into the sun. They also had creature comforts that really weren't up to the standards of the time. They didn't have memory seats, they didn't have things like modern navigation, they didn't even have Bluetooth that could do music streaming. So to retrofit all of that would be a little bit on the expensive side. So if you're okay with all of that, then this is the car for you. But if you're not, then it is quite a hard pill to swallow. Now, having said all that, would I buy this car? I think I would. For 25 grand, that is less than new Camry money. You can get a V12 Aston Martin that looks good every day of the week, and it's just the best driving experience you can get. It is an immense daily driver, and I would recommend anyone to get one of these cars. Just make sure that you have enough money saved, because if that engine goes, it's really expensive. Now, at number 4, at a little less than 24 grand, is a 2009 Maserati GranTurismo. I am really enjoying this because this is just a list of cars I'm going to buy. Maserati GranTurismo is possibly one of the best looking Maseratis ever made, well, within the last 20 years or so. Now, this is a car that I've actually spent some time in the back seat, and no, not for the reason you think. This car, even though it's a 2-door car, it could fit 4 adults very comfortably. I didn't want for space and even headroom. There was a ton of headroom in the back. So the good would be the space, the looks, and the fact that it has a Ferrari-derived V8. Now, the bad is sort of bad because Maserati prices are Maserati prices. You're paying for the name, and if you don't know somebody that can work on these cars and has specific experience with this model, then you're gonna be paying through the nose, probably through a dealer or some sort of independent shop that deals specifically with these. Also, it's not as sporty as you may think. It is a very good cushy GT cruiser, but to make it sporty, to make it competitive with any sports cars of the day, you really have to do your homework. Change the suspension, you have to change the wheels and tires, you have to do some weight reduction. It's not really that easy to make those cars like super quick and better handling. So if you're okay with that, then maybe you should get this car. But if you're not, if you want something more sporty, then I would look elsewhere. But would I buy this? I would always go for a cheap Maserati, because I'm an idiot. But if I'm telling other people to buy it, maybe I would err on the side of caution and try to do a PPI beforehand, make sure the car is good to go, and then I would consider buying it. So I would say 60-40, with 60 being, yeah, I would buy it. Number 3, we have a 1999 Rolls Royce. I'll tell you what, this, just in depreciation alone, is a very, very, very good deal. However, I didn't even know that they made Rolls Royces in 1999. I thought that they stopped in like 1984 and then they went into the Phantom in 2003. I did not know that they made sort of modern cars. And the reason why is because this car looks like it was made in the late 80s. It's not very modern looking, but I can imagine that this car has enough of that kind of like mishmash of old school and new school that it would be problematic for you in case you need to repair the car. So let's start off with the good. It's a Rolls Royce. So Rolls Royces are always going to be very cool, very luxurious cars, very imposing, very striking. So there's a lot that comes with that spirit of ecstasy. But then you have the bad, which is lots and lots and lots of money spent on repairs and parts and things that are hard to find and components that could have been engineered better. There are so many issues that could be present on this car, it's not even funny. And this is to give you a performance of what a Camry would give you in the modern day. Now the question comes to whether I would buy it, and the answer on this car is no, because I've had a Bentley of more or less the same age, and believe you me, it is not fun to work on that thing. I can imagine how many issues this car has just from an engineering standpoint, even if everything is sorted mechanically. So I would sort of steer clear from this car and try to save up a little bit more money and get an S-Class, because the S-Class is a lot better than this. Number 2 is a BMW M6 from the year 2008 for the princely sum of a little less than 14 grand. I don't know how I feel about this, because I have some very strong opinions about BMW engines in general, particularly the high-strung performance variants. I think the M6 is a wonderful car. The fact that it has a V10 is very good, and there are a lot of good things about this platform. Namely that the looks are sort of getting back into style. It wasn't the best looking car when it came out, but now, if you look around the used car marketplace, this is a very striking car, and it does have a nice coupe shape. And add to the fact that you have a high revving 500 horsepower V10, it really does make this car shine. Now, the fact that it also has a 7-speed single clutch manual gearbox, and when I say manual, I mean manual, it's an automated manual called an SMG, that really doesn't make this car any better. Now, these did come with a 6-speed as an option later on, and I believe you can do a manual conversion if you were so inclined, but as it stands, I think this is a good enough value that you can get $14,000 out of this car come sale time if you want to sell it a little bit further down the line. However, there is a caveat, and that is all the bad with this car, because this car has some astronomical repair bills and things that you wouldn't have to do on any other car. That engine, that 5-liter V10, that S85 engine that makes a ton of power, has an Achilles heel, and those are the rod bearings. The rod bearings are what the connecting rods ride on, and they are in contact with the crank, and they don't get enough oiling, and when they don't get enough oiling, they become scorched and can eventually just fail altogether, and then your engine just blows up and grenades or has catastrophic damage. And you don't want that in a car like this, because oh boy, is that gonna be an expensive day for you. But in addition to that, you also have SMG pump failures, which are sort of notorious. It's not a matter of if but when. And you have a lot of electronics issues, you have Vanos issues, you have cooling issues, because the entire cooling system was made of plastic. I don't know why that was a thing, but if all these issues are sorted and you can go to a mechanic that knows what they're doing, get a PPI, make sure everything was changed as it was supposed to, then you have a pretty good car on your hands. And would I buy this at 14 grand? I would probably haggle this down. I would probably be as close to 10 as I could be, and then you'd have a lot of car for the money. So I would give this a sort of a tentative yes, depending on how the pre-purchase inspection goes. But if everything goes well, then you have a really, really cool, really fast car that hopefully doesn't blow up. And your number one pick at less than $10,000 is a 2006 Mercedes-Benz CLS55 AMG. Right off the bat, you can see by the smile on my face that you guys picked correctly, and this is the deal of a century. Now, these Mercedes-Benzes are very commonly depreciated to the point of almost free. I mean, you can get an AMG car for next to nothing, and let me tell you what you get for that money. With the good comes some bad, but let's go over some good first. You have a 5.4 liter supercharged AMG hand-built engine. You have the signature of the guy who built it on the engine. You have a car that looks amazing. I think it's one of the best looking four doors. It has that four-door coupe styling that honestly I just love. It looks amazing. It looks contemporary. You could say that this is a brand new car and people would believe you. It also has around 500 horsepower, which helps. It definitely helps. It has a transmission that isn't some flappy paddle automated manual, but a regular 5-speed automatic that they put in a ton of cars. And if it goes wrong, which it won't because it's built to withstand the nuclear holocaust, that transmission can be found for next to nothing at any junkyard. Now, there are a few issues with all of this sort of complexity because these cars are very complex, and that is the fact that these cars are very complex. You have a ton of electrical nightmares potentially, depending on what the previous owner did, if they want to do wiring themselves, if they neglected some service. This is a very complex car when it comes to recoding modules. It has something like 30 or 40 different ECUs for the various stuff in the car. So make sure to get at least a scan of all the systems in the car to make sure everything is working as it should. If that's all fine, then you only have to worry about the suspension, which is also another expensive thing. It's either Airmatic or ABC, which is Hydra-Pneumatic, and that is crazy expensive if something goes. It's super high pressure. So there's a lot of technology packed into this car, but there's also a ton of risk financially. So make sure you have a lot of money left over, and you should, because for less than 10 grand, this is an amazing deal. Now, would I buy this? I already have a S600 Mercedes. I have an SL55 with this engine in it, and yes, I would buy it any day of the week. This is one of the best deals that you can get. I would always tell people to buy these M113K compressor engines because they are so good, they are bulletproof, and they are a lot of fun. They're way faster than you think they are. So that is it for our first episode of Found on Auto Tempest. Hopefully you guys liked it, but if you want to participate in the next one, you can send me an email at foundonautotempest@gmail.com, and the theme of next week's video is going to be cheap cars that make you look rich. So if you find some cheap cars that make you look rich, head on over to Auto Tempest, link in the description below, and send me your listings for cheap cars that make you look rich, and then I'll go over them and hopefully I don't make fun of them too much. So having said that, this is me reminding you guys that life is just too short to drive boring cars. And yes, I did steal that saying from somewhere. I'm not sure where, but it works here.